Hey, welcome everybody to our today's webinar on database lifecycle management. So our one and only Steve Jones is going to run us through how the Redgate DLM tools can help you get your databases into source control effortlessly, and also how to push your changes through a CI and a release management process. So just a couple of housekeeping items. So everybody will be on mute. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the GoToWebinar panel under the questions, and we'll try our best to go over them during our demo today. This webinar is also being recorded, so a link will be sent around as soon as the video is available online. That's it from me. Over to you, Steve.
All right, thank you very much, Arnie. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Steve Jones, and we're here to talk about database lifecycle management today. This is kind of it sounds like a more formal process, something you may have learned about in school or heard about in the past, but really the whole idea with application lifecycle management, which is ALM, and database lifecycle management, which is DLM, is to actually try to move faster, try to get your changes going as quickly as possible from development over here all the way over through to production where our users can see it. Saw a great talk from the Pipeline conference a little while ago where one of the developers was talking about that a feature isn't actually finished until customers can use it. It's not finished when we get done with it as developers. It's finished when customers can actually give you feedback and see if it works. So that's the whole idea of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to go fast. I'm going to run through a lot of stuff today in this hour. If you're confused, if you have questions, please ask them. If you have questions later or you want more information, we'll have some contact information up there, so please feel free to contact us. Introduce myself, I'm Steve Jones. I actually run SQLServerCentral.com right now. That's my most of my job right now. I started that site about 15 years ago after working in software for about 10 years. I've been in this business a little over 25 years. I've done development and administration. I've worked in big companies, huge power companies and software companies. I've worked in tiny startup companies where you could count how many people were there, and a variety of industries. So I've had a lot of experience with different versions of software and different ways of working. I've been working with SQL Server since 1991, so since it actually ported over to OS2, and I've worked with all the versions since then. My contact information is up there if you want to get a hold of me. Twitter is usually the best way to find me. I also work for Redgate Software. They bought SQL Server Central about 8 years ago, and so I'm an evangelist for Redgate, and I go around the country and actually around the world now, I guess, speaking and writing about SQL Server and trying to help you. We're a software company, and we build tools to help you build software. That's really what we do. We have some administration stuff, but most of our focus is helping companies build software better. And we have some .NET tools, we have a lot of SQL Server tools, we have some Oracle and MySQL and other things as well, but really we've had a lot of success in this area helping you build software better. Lots of huge companies, lots of small companies use our stuff, and we continually try to get better as well, and part of our focus now is to help you build software faster at a high quality level with this DLM process. We also believe in giving back to the community. Redgate bought SQL Server Central. They run SimpleTalk as well. We do lots of free ebooks, lots of free information. We support lots of community events because while we want you to buy our tools, we also want you to be better at using them and better at building software. And so we invest back into the community in a variety of ways. So I'm sure most of you have had to deploy applications. You've had to develop on databases and deploy those changes through to production, and you find that it's stressful, it's problematic. We always have issues when we're trying to figure out how to deploy software. And a lot of that's on us, that we're just, in general, a fairly immature industry. We don't always do things the best way, that the amount of information is very disparate between different people, and so we have all kinds of problems. I've listed some of them here. Many of you have probably seen a lot of these things in your career. I know I have seen probably all of these over time. Over the last decade or so, people have moved to Agile, Scrum, XP, other development ideas and methodologies that are intended to bring engineering to software, trying to make things more reliable, more repeatable, that we try to reduce the human error that can happen. And so some of the benefits of going to a CI process, which is continuous integration, or continuous delivery process, CD, is that you can move faster with less mistakes. Because when we find mistakes, we fix them, and because we fixed a mistake, it shouldn't happen again. Computers are really good at doing what we tell them to do over and over and over again. Humans are really bad at that. Humans are really good at being creative and finding new ways to do things. That's good in building software. It's bad in deploying software. So we want to try to move things around, right? Humans create software, do a better job of it. We let the computer actually deploy it and move it to different systems in a repeatable, reliable manner. I'm sure some of you heard about DevOps. The idea in DevOps is really that we try to communicate much better. DevOps is a cultural change. It doesn't mean that developers are responsible for production. It doesn't mean that operational people have to do development. It means that we work together, we help each other, we communicate highly, and that we find ways to make sure that all of the work being done in development gets to production faster, quicker, and it works when it gets there. Or if it doesn't work, we get bug fixes moving very quickly through as well. We're going to have this available for download. You can look at it, but I'm not going to read through all these things. But the idea is really that we're agile, we move faster, things work better. So what can Redgate do for you? We spent a lot of time solving some of these problems internally with our own software. We realized that there's better ways to do the database work as well, and so we've been investing a lot in it. Here is kind of an ideal pipeline that you might set up. Across the top, you have the flow of how our software works. From left to right, it goes from development to operations. So on the left-hand side, we've got our developers on the very top. They're working, typically on their laptops or desktops. They're working in their own environments. Ideally, they have their own copy of a database. Now, this isn't a 3 terabyte production database. It's a copy of all the schema, all the code, limited amount of test data, where they can write code. They can try things. They can see what works well. Obviously, Redgate has a number of tools that plug into Management Studio that help. We give you SQL Prompt, we have SQL Test, we have SQL Source Control. We have other tools as well that can help you do your development process. And then the idea is that all of your developers actually put code into source control. So in a version control system, you have all of your create scripts, all of your alter scripts, all of the database code that you need in there. Just like the C# developers do, the Java developers, the PHP developers, they all send their code to a source control system. So they have a backup, they have it versioned, they can keep track of things. More importantly, they can undo mistakes that they make, because we're all going to make mistakes. We're going to create bugs, or we're going to go down a development path that doesn't work doesn't fit the requirements, and we need to undo it. There's all kinds of source control systems you can use. There's TFS, Git, Mercurial, Vault, SourceSafe, Perforce, CVS. There's tons of them out there. We don't care what you use. SQL Source Control plugs into almost every one that's out there. And the idea is that it allows you to very easily capture your code in source control. From that point, once it's in source control, we have the ability to trigger a CI process, or continuous integration process. And what that really does is it runs through a very fast cycle that allows us to give feedback to the developers quickly about whether or not their code works. I've got a number of items in the cycle here listed. I'll talk about them in a little more detail, but essentially we put the software together, we run some automated testing against it, and then we either let the developers know there's a problem and we stop, or we produce a potential release candidate. In this case, from Redgate, we produce a NuGet package, which is a view of what the database should look like when it gets to production, and that will carry forward into the further environments. Now, Redgate has a SQL CI product that helps you get this done. There's a variety of ways you could do this. SQL CI makes it really simple, though, and fairly easy for you to get it done. There's also all kinds of CI servers that you use to execute this process. There's TFS Build, there's TeamCity, there's Hudson, there's Jenkins, Bamboo, Cruise Control. There's a variety of servers, and all they really do is assemble software. They assemble .NET software, they assemble Java software, they assemble C software, it doesn't matter. They compile it, put it together, let you know right away if it will or will not compile, and then run tests against it. That's essentially what they're doing. They're a really fancy SQL agent scheduling engine that builds software. From there, the next step would really be is to take that NuGet package and use that to upgrade databases. So in this case, we move to the release management area, which is where we get the software to move from server to server in a repeatable, reliable manner. It can go to testing, to QA, to customer review, to beta, to user acceptance, to support, to whatever environments you have out there. Release management allows you to make sure that if you can deploy it to one, it will repeat that process over and over again. I'm sure lots of you like me think we can repeat a process over and over again, but we'll get busy, we'll get tired, we'll be in a hurry. We will make mistakes going from machine to machine. Release management just automates this in a very repeatable fashion. It takes that NuGet package, generates upgrade scripts, deploys it to each environment. We don't really care what release management software you use. We have plugins to work with the Microsoft RM software or Octopus or Bamboo. We're working on other ones though. I'm sure with the configuration we could work with the BMC one or the CA or Urban Code or whatever release management software you have out there. Let us know if you need help working with any of those. Obviously from there we want to get to production, and then we want to monitor our software, because the whole idea is we need feedback loops to build better software. In the CI process, in the CI stage, we let developers know very quickly. In the production stage, it's a little bit slower, but ideally we are monitoring the way our software performs, our servers perform. Does it actually meet the business requirements, and we feed that back to development and make changes from there. At Redgate, we have DLM dashboard that helps you keep track of what version of your software is in which environment. We have SQL Monitor that looks at performance and hardware, but it can look at business processes as well. The whole idea is that we keep flowing through this cycle over and over and over again to get our changes through. So let's look at how that actually works. So I like to start with DLM dashboard, which is it's a free product from Redgate for small environments. You can download it today and try it. And essentially it allows you to load up your different databases and classify them into different environments. So right now, if we look, if I start on the right-hand side, I've got production. There's my production system. I've got this database. I've named it production just so we can keep track of it. It's amber, which means that there's been a change made to this system that I wasn't aware of, or an operational person wasn't aware of. However, we know what the change is because it's in that amber box there where it says June RC1. So this tells me what is the version of the schema that's out there. The stored procedures, the views, the functions, tables, everything. And I can see the previous version, it was the 2015 baseline. And it's an amber because it just wants an acknowledgement. So one of your management folks, one of your operational folks can take a look at this. They can see what changed at the bottom, and they can say, this is good, or whatever comment they need that they looked at it. And then we know somebody's actually acknowledged that that's the same. That's a valid deployment. It wasn't an unexpected change. If somebody had to do a hotfix to production, they added an index or changed a piece of code because there was an emergency, this would actually go red, but we would know that a change had been made, and we could decide how we then get that back into other environments and get it back to our source control system. To the left of the production environment is the acceptance environment, or the staging environment, or user acceptance, or beta, or whatever you call it in your environment. We can see here, this one's green. It's got the June 2015 RC1, which I just acknowledged in production. Right in the middle, we've got test environments. Right? Here's where QA and humans actually look at software. We want lots of automated testing in general, but we need humans to look at software too, because humans will do things that we don't think about writing tests for. Right? They will try weird paths. They will use different parameters than we would ever expect to happen. So I've got my test environment there as well. That's the same level. If I move back one environment, I have an integration environment. Here's where I take all the code from all the developers and I put it together. So every stored procedure change that any developer has made, we've pulled it out of source control and we stick it in one place where developers can actually look at it and make sure that the application still runs, that it performs acceptably, all the stuff that we need to do. This integration environment is actually the output of my CI process. That's where it gets updated. In this case, it's been what we call drifted. It's moved away from a schema and we don't know what it was. Previously, it was that June 2015 RC1, but there's been a change. So I can actually look at that and say, hey, there was a change there. But I'm going to hold off for a second. I'm going to go over to the far left. That's my development environment. This would be where my laptop is. Now, I might have lots of these development environments, and typically, I wouldn't have this in the DLM dashboard for general view for the operational people to look at, but I might have it running on my development machine because when I make a change and I see what I made, I could say, hey, I have looked at this and I'm going to call this, let's call this the August RC1. Probably should say 2015 in there. But whatever standard I wanted to, I could put a comment, change proc for whatever I did. And then when I acknowledge these changes, on my development machine, we're going to know what I did. But more importantly, my integration environment knows that those schemas are the same because it can view the state of the schema and look at all the code. Right? At Redgate, we're very good at comparing databases together. So now my integration environment goes from red to amber because now we know what version of the schema this is. We know what change was made. Perhaps this ties to a requirements document or a bug fix or something in Jira or whatever you're using, but now we know, and I can do this. I'm going to acknowledge this just because I don't like things that aren't green. My OCD kicks in a little bit and it bothers me. So now everything looks good, kind of in a stable environment. Now my 3 environments on the right, production, acceptance, and testing, and really integration, those are handled by my release management software. Here's Octopus deploy. We're going to look at this in a little more detail, but I can see all my environments here. They're all green. I've made no deployments to those. My CI environment, where I get my integration environment, here's Team City. That's going to handle that. And then, of course, my development environment we handle from Management Studio. So here's generic Management Studio. I'm going to zoom in here to the left, my Object Explorer. So I've got a bunch of databases here. They're all in one instance only because I'm trying to make this demo simply. If I'm switching back and forth between a bunch of machines, it gets confusing quickly. But ideally, you can see here I've got my development environment, my integration environment, my test, and my staging environments. They're all in one instance, but they're all separate databases. They could be on separate machines, and that's typically how we would do it in a larger company or in most companies I've worked in. We've had those on separate machines. Here they're all together. My production environment is actually down here in this prod instance. We'll look at that in a second. It's another database that just says production, and again, that's a separate instance there. You'll notice that that dev environment that I have highlighted has a little green icon next to it, not the yellow one. That's because it's actually linked to source control. And in this case, I've got it linked to a Subversion source control system. I'm going to pop over to a different database and just pop this up. And you'll see here that we actually link to Subversion TFS Vault, and then we can do Git, Mercurial, Perforce, Plastic, a bunch of other ones with custom systems. We're updating source control all the time now. We've got a team working hard on this and adding first level support for all this source control system. So I think Arnie wants to run a poll now and ask you what kind of source control systems you use. If we could take a few minutes and answer that. Now all of these source control systems kind of work the same. They're all designed to capture changes to files, right? Text files, binary files, whatever, and keep track of the different versions. So I know who made a change, what time, what change was made, especially if it's text, then we can easily surface those changes, and then allow me to pick and choose versions. If I want to restore an old version or not, I can branch so that I can have isolated development for a set of code, all kinds of things that happen there. Did we close the poll, Arnie?
Yep, looks like we have a lot of TFS users.
Which makes sense, right? TFS is Microsoft's source control system kind of built in their development environment. TFS works great. I'm not demoing TFS because it's a little bit heavyweight for this laptop, and I need things to at least proceed at a reasonable pace here. But TFS is great. TFS is very similar to how this works with Subversion. They're both centralized version control system as opposed to Git or Mercurial, which are distributed systems. So in this database, I've got tables, views. I've got all kinds of stuff going on here. Now I want to pop open one of these store procedures, and I'm actually going to make a change to this store procedure. So right now, this store procedure is really simple. It just gets some data back from a table. In this case, I don't want to do select star because that's a bad idea. What I actually want to do is remove the fields that I don't need and stick with just a few that I do need. So in this case, this is back in a web application. I know that most of the time I don't really need the address and phone number information for somebody, and I don't need the LinkedIn information. So I need to edit this store procedure. So let me do that. That takes place. Now this store procedure, that previous version was already deployed out to other servers. So if I were to go to my production server, let's just look at that real quick. you'll see I've got this version of the stored procedure that's a different version, essentially. Come on. My machine is as tired as I am this morning. So if we look at this one, you'll see I've got the select star there. I'm going to keep that handy so we can look at it again later. So let's do this. So production's over here in a small window. Here's my development system where I made that change. Now I've also got, on my development system, I've got tables with code in them, or sorry, data in them. So for this case, let's look at this one table. You'll see I've got 4 rows in this table, actually. And if I take that query, I've actually got 4 rows in my production system as well. So let's come back over here and we'll pop open a new query. 4 rows there as well. So over on the right-hand side, I've got production. Over on the left-hand side, I've got my development system. Same data for now. Now on my development system, I'm going to add a new row. So let's insert, let's just say, what do we want to say this? Denver Broncos going to have a good season this year, so we'll go ahead and use those as the system. I've added a new row there, only on development, not on production. But this is lookup data. Right? If I look at what was here, this is lookup data that's actually powering, something on my web application or something in my fat client application. So I've added a new row here that I'm testing. This is data that I'm actually going to flow through my development process, just like I flow through store procedure and function changes. I've got some kind of reference lookup static data that I want to move through. Now you'll notice over here in the Object Explorer, I've actually had a couple of items pop up on my various folders. These indicate changes to the schema. Now if I were working on a development database with a bunch of other developers connecting to the same database, this lets me know what's happening and what's changing. But it's also a clue for me when I'm doing development on my own. I can see that at the database level I've made a change. We've had a little blue ball there. If I open that view, I can see that it was actually in the programmability section and in the store procedure section. And if I zoom out and open up store procedures, we'll actually see that that store procedure that I altered was the one that got marked with the blue ball. It means I've got pending changes. They've been made in my development database. They're not in source control. Let's commit those to source control.
Hey, Steve. There is a question asking, how do you tell SQL source control what's the lookup data and what is not?
How do I tell SQL source control what's lookup data? So here's my SQL source control in the center where you can see this. You'll see this first row is highlighted in yellow, which means that's the object I'm looking at. And down here at the bottom, we'll see that there's the data. The 4 rows in source control on the right. On the left, I've got the 4 rows at the bottom plus the additional row that I added here. And if I scroll over, we'll see what it is. How did I do that? If I were to look in the tables section here, and I'll just pick a table, it doesn't matter, there is a bunch of items in my menu that are add-ins from Redgate. One of them is other SQL source control tasks, and I've got this link or unlinked static data. When I go to that tab, I get a list of all the tables that are actually in my system, and you'll notice that I've got checkboxes next to 2 country codes and RSS feeds. Those are reference data or lookup data that I want to send through to other systems, right? Zip codes, provinces, states, countries. There's certain generic items that we want as lookup data, statuses, those kinds of things. The stuff that's in articles or blogs, that is user data that's going to change from system to system. I don't want that to go through. So by checking these boxes, we're actually storing that data in source control. So in this case, we can see that we're storing that change, which was a change to reference data. If I look at the store procedure, you'll see on the right-hand side what's in source control, which is that bad select star habit. On the left-hand side is the change that I've made. I can put in comments. For my source control system. These comments are what will appear in source control, and they're what I will use to figure out what I did 6 months from now when I look back at this code. If I had a TFS item, like I had a particular work item, I could, I've got the UK keyboard, I could use a pound with the number of the work item, and it would link this a commit to that work item in TFS as well, which we actually surface here in this help item. If I zoom in, it's pound A with the item number, and that will allow you to commit and link this to a particular TFS item. So let's commit that. It's going to go through SQL source control. It's going to use our Redgate compare technology. If I had a rename or something, a not null column where I need to do some scripting, we can actually store the scripting in our migrations tab, but I'm not doing that today. Potentially I had the object locked, so I could lock or unlock it so other developers aren't making changes, but I'm not worrying about that today. So that's been changed. Now let me go over to Subversion. Here's my Subversion system. This is the Tortoise SVN browser that lets me just kind of look at source control. In TFS, you would look at it, through TFS clients. Here I've got my database. I've got my application and database separately here. And in the database folder, I've got state. And in state, I've got all of the different types of objects. Now, Redgate source control puts this structure together, but you could certainly do this in your own system generally. Where's that store procedure? So if I look at revisions here, let's sort the other way. That get context is the latest revision in SVN, and that actually has the code that I changed. So I don't have select star. I've got that limited set of fields here. And if I were to look in my data folder, we'll actually see that, I think I clicked that twice, I've actually got that new item that I added for the Broncos right there as well. So SQL source control allows me to move that stuff back and forth very easily from one system to the next. Allow me to go from database to database. I could pull back changes from source control, all of that stuff. Now, developers using source control, they're capturing all that code. The next step is CI. And you can see right here in my build number 8, I actually have a build running. Now, while this is running, I'll talk about this for a minute, but Arnie has a poll asking if any of you are actually using CI, so you want to open that up and see what systems you might be using. We're always curious because it helps us decide where our developer resources go. Do we need more TFS support or more Bamboo support or whatever? So, what's a CI server? This is really a scheduling agent. It knows how to build software, and it does so on a schedule or on a trigger from source control or anything else. Really, it's designed to build software the same way that you do, but it does it in automated fashion. So for you Visual Studio developers, you hit F5 to compile your code and see if it actually works. You may run a Microsoft Unit Test Framework project against it to see if it passed tests. That's what the CI server would do. That's what TFS build would do. Jenkins, Hudson, whatever server you have, that's what they'll do. On the database side, it's a little bit different because what I need to do is pull out all this object code and I need to compile it in a certain order, right? Typically I want to compile tables before views and functions and stored procedures. I need to worry about, foreign keys later and indexes and all that stuff. So, do you get that poll result, Arnie?
Yep. So it looks like majority of people, those who use build systems, they use TFS a lot, and also TeamCity is a popular one.
Yeah, so TeamCity is great. We at Redgate work closely with those guys. TFS build works great as well. If you want to get started, TeamCity is free for small projects, but you could go download Jenkins or some of the open source ones and just use those. There's no reason to avoid any of those. They're great systems and they work well. You figure a few more things out, but they all work the same way, really. So let me look at this project while this build is running. We can see what's going on. Now, project is really, like you expect, it's a placeholder that is, allows me to group together everything I need to happen here. There's all kinds of stuff over here on the left that we're not really going to worry too much about. But, really it's just a way of capturing, a set of steps you want to have happen in a different way. In this case, I've got 3 steps here in my build for software for this database. I'm not building the application. I certainly could build the application at the same time, but I'm not doing it here. In this case, my first step is to actually build a database. Now, Redgate, we've got SQL CI, which is a product that makes this really simple. If you've got a really tightly controlled environment, you could certainly hard code script the way that you build your system. There's a number of things you could do. But in this case, what we're doing is we're building the entire database from source control. So we actually build a scratch database and grab all that code, put it together, and then run it on an instance of SQL Server. We verify there's no unresolved references. We verify that somebody hasn't refactored a table and then the changes aren't in the view, or they've refactored a view and the sort procedure doesn't handle it, or whatever types of code issues you could have. We kind of verify a lot of that, which is a fairly low bar, but it does catch issues that people have. Once we're done with that, we have the second step, which is a test step. Now, in this case, we have a plugin that allows us to run any T-SQL-T tests that you have out there. You could use a different step if you had the Microsoft Unit Test Framework or DB Unit or T-SQL Unit or whatever testing methodology you have. But we like T-SQL-T. It's written based on NUnit and JUnit, which are unit test frameworks. It's built for databases. The tests are written in T-SQL. They handle things like result sets and table views and things that can be important for database testing. And so what we do now is if we pass the build step, we actually then take a database, same code from source control, and we actually run those unit tests against it. In this case, you'll see that in the middle here, I say run only unit tests. I have the ability, let's look at this in detail, to run all the tests or multiple tests. In this case, what we see now is a plugin from Redgate, but really it's just a form that populates a command line call. In this case, come on, down here at the bottom where it says run every test, run only certain tests, I could have multiple sets of unit tests here. I could have other square brackets. I can't do a square bracket, that says, test 2 square bracket, and that would run tests, right? Maybe I have articles tests or blogs tests or different things available, so I could run multiple ones of those. And then my last step in my build steps is what we call a sync step. Here I'm actually making a call to Octopus deploy, but we do have a plugin as well that's a little simpler to use. Either case, all we're doing is we're taking that set of code from source control that was packaged up in the build step, and we're going to deploy it to the integration environment. So we make sure that we actually deploy these changes forward, and that gets us the first step of building a release candidate that we can move on. So let's see how we're doing here. It's actually the tests have passed. We're creating the Octopus deploy release. If I show you what's happening in the background here, there's a build log you can follow along. This kind of updates as it's running. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, the little running icon will update the page as it's going. If I look in the build step, what we'll see is we've actually zoom in a little bit. I've created this scratch database here. It's just a random database. We can use LocalDB or a real instance of SQL Server, whatever you want to do, but we create this database, we validate the state. If I expand these items, they really just list all of the objects that exist in source control, and so they create them in the right order, so that the references resolve, your sysappends is accurate, all that stuff, and verify that they're correct. If that's the case, then it packages all that view of code from source control into a NuGet package, which is really just a zip file, but it gives me a version of the code at that point in time. Then we do the testing. In this case, the testing actually just runs tsqlt.run with the various parameters that we need, depending on which test you've chosen. And now we're doing the Octopus deploy side, which is just deploying this package further on. It's creating a release, and it's running slow today. But I can actually see that in Octopus deploy as well over here in this integration environment. The little green bar is moving, which means that it's actually doing that deployment. And my versioning is updated. This is 1.0.8 now. If you remember, it was 1.0.7. But that's coming out of this build here, which is actually build number 8. And when it links to Octopus, it's passing in this build number as the minor version number in Octopus. So we'll let that run. Hopefully it finishes in a second. Any questions, Arnie, while I'm waiting for this to finish? Hello, Arnie?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Arnie fell asleep, maybe.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect.
I can hear you. So,
yeah, so
any questions?
So I guess Matt is asking if you should use SQL Sync or compare to deploy to production, or could you use it?
So could I use SQL Sync to deploy to production? Absolutely, I could. I wouldn't recommend it because there's a couple things you want to think about here. Number one is I'm triggering off a development build here. So I'm kind of trusting that a developer hasn't made a logical error implementing something incorrectly. So there's no reason I couldn't deploy to production instead of integration, but I would not recommend it. I would at least have one more stage where I would test the deployment to a staging server at the very least, which in that case I might actually update from production to make sure that it's going to go to production without any issues. Because don't forget, production could change, right? In this case, I haven't changed production, but somebody could change production in my dashboard. So I'd want to be careful about doing that. But deployment should be deployment. You should be able to automate the deployment to any environment that you have. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Anything else?
Nope, that was it for now.
Okay. So this my test passed, and this actually deployed to production, or sorry, integration. In this case, this is completed. We can see that this deployment has happened here, and DLM dashboard has actually detected that we've drifted. Right, I changed my development environment, didn't acknowledge what that was, and integration has changed as well. These two drifts are not necessarily equal. Just keep that in mind. Only if I review and acknowledge one can it tell if they're the same. I'm actually going to start this next deployment first because this tends to run a little slow. So I'm going to go to Octopus deploy, and I'm going to come back and explain this in a second, but let me just kick this off quickly, hopefully quickly. Come on. Let's see. Come on. Come on, Octopus. Oh, I don't want to do that. Let's hold on. It's going to come back. This actually thing tends to work pretty well. I don't think I have anything on the host. Maybe PowerPoint has gone crazy. Let me just promote this to staging real quick, and then we'll go back and talk about this. So, come on. Hopefully, in your environment, your operational people will have more powerful machines, and they won't have this issue. So, is that working? Yes. Okay. So let me come back to DLM dashboard. We made a change in development. Right? Let's just acknowledge that change. As a developer, I can go in and just say, hey, this was a change that I agree. This was, August RC2, and we'll say this is based on, imagine that's a pound symbol. We've got a UK VM here, and I forget where my pound symbol is, but in any case, I'm linking to some number in a work item in TFS here. And I say, this is it. This is what I know. Once I acknowledge this, now DLM dashboard knows what that complete view of the scheme looks like, keeps track of it, and you'll see that it's also looked at integration and said, I know that this is a version of the schema that's here, so I'm going to mark that as well, and it's in amber. I'm just going to leave that alone for now. Now in Octopus deploy, what's happened is we have a project that's set up in integration to say, take this NuGet package and look at the next environment and deploy the changes, create an upgrade script in essence. And that's what happened here when my CI process called into Octopus deploy. It actually created this integration environment. Now I said, take that same thing and deploy it to staging. And so in this case, what it's actually going to do is it's going to apply that upgrade script over here to staging. If I look at what's happening here, is this project is running, and in this project I have a number of steps. And just like in CI, I can configure the build server to do certain things. In release management, you configure your releases to do certain things. They're very similar. For example, the Bamboo server from Atlassian does CI and release management kind of together. It's built to kind of handle the requirements of both. And they're very similar with some slight differences. In this case, my staging process is going to actually refresh from production. So it's going to go to my production system and pull back the current view of production into my staging environment because I want to be sure that I can deploy to production. So I want to make sure that my staging environment looks like production. So that's one of the steps here. Then it's going to grab those packages. It's going to get the upgrade scripts, and it's going to deploy those to my staging server. However, in this case, step 4 will actually be a review step where it's going to pause the deployment once it's in that state and ask a DBA or an operational person to actually look at the upgrade scripts itself and decide if they're okay and then approve them, because we don't want any old person to necessarily approve a deployment to production. We want to make sure that we're aware of what's going on. So in this case, we have a step here that would email or text or notify or whatever you configure it to do the operational staff to actually go look at this deployment. Each of these deployments happens at different frequencies. For example, development changes happen constantly, right? I make changes every few minutes in development. Come on. Boy, this VM is really slow today, and I apologize for that. But in my development environment, I make changes constantly on the left-hand side. My integration environment typically has less changes because not everything that I do in development will I commit to source control. I'll write a query and I'll say, it doesn't quite give me the right results. Let me change that. I may add a column to a table and then say, well, I misspelled, country. So let me drop that column and add it back as the correct spelling. And then once I commit to source control, I'll have that go to integration. Not every integration build is going to go to testing. For example, if I have 5 developers, I may not want a human to look at every build, because if each of my developers makes a commit for one change, say one store procedure change, that's 5 builds that will go into integration. And it's only when all those builds are finished, for example, if those 4 were at the same second, I would have 4 separate builds. Each of those builds would be the previous view of source control with that one change added in. So 4 builds. If the 5th commit occurred, an hour later, that would have that one change, but source control would have those previous 4 changes already in there as the current view. So now my build would have all of those changes together. So maybe that's the only one that I want to go to testing where a human looks at it. So the frequency is different here, right? I'm going to find issues in tests. We know we will. I do enough builds, I'm going to find issues in tests. So the amount of builds or the amount of deployments I'm going to make to staging or acceptance is going to be fewer than testing. Then obviously I may have issues in acceptance, so less builds go to production. But we still want them to go quickly and fast, and hopefully my machine will cooperate with the fast part of things. We're 45 minutes in here, so this is fairly quick. But there are people that are on a cycle like this where they will deploy to production in minutes because they get things through these environments quick enough. They have humans that are looking for specific changes, or they'll test specific pages or things like that. And they'll actually be able to deploy changes through to production in minutes as opposed to days or weeks or months. I would suspect that a lot of you, if you actually looked at your cycle time from the time that the developer starts working on a feature until it gets to production, you would find it's much longer than you think. It might be days, it might be weeks, it could be months. I'm not talking about hot fixes. I'm saying just a feature that somebody requests, somebody asks for a change. How long does it take for a customer to actually look at that? It could be a substantial amount of time.
Steve, there's one question. So it says we use shared development model. So does the DLM pipeline look different for that type of a setup?
So in a shared development model, does the pipeline look different? Not really. Let me flip back over here. Let's go back up one slide. In the shared model, on the far left-hand side, what you would see is instead of 2 developers with 2 databases, you have 2 developers with 1 database. Now, really what happens there is each of the developers, if you use a SQL Source Controller or Visual Studio or SSTT or whatever you're doing, you're making changes to the same database, but then you still have to get those changes and put them in source control. And so the real difference is you have a potential of collisions in changes for developers actually working, as opposed to having those collisions be caught by the CI system. And in this case, you typically want to delay that collision to the CI process, because if I stop developers from working, sometimes they can't figure out why something changed, because if I'm working in this area and somebody changes something in an area to the side, and there's a connection I'm not aware of, for example, a trigger or something else, it slows me down. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what I did, not realizing somebody else changed something, or vice versa. Whereas if it comes in the CI system, I get a report that says, hey, you changed this, but it broke because there's a trigger or somebody changed their stored procedure, their view, or something else. And then I get a better view of things. The pipeline itself kind of works the exact same way in the shared model as opposed to the dedicated model, but it's just where the conflicts are surfaced, essentially. So this actually finished. If I go to my summary, we'll see in this yellow bar it says waiting, and let me zoom in. Here it says it's assigned to nobody. Look at the details, log all of that. I'm going to assign it to myself. I'm just going to say approved. You may have some comments. I'm going to let this proceed just because it's running slow. But what's happening here is that I approve this release, and you'll see it's going through these steps. Here is the actual script that's running. If I say, let's look at this script. Boy, as a developer, I like my machines to be really snappy, so this is crazy. We can see we've got some setup. Here is the alter. Notice it doesn't have all the other objects in there. You'll see there was multiple tables. There's other stored procedures and things. It's just got the alter for this stored procedure with the new code. If I come down, there's actually a couple pending things. If you remember, the development integration environment were red, unknown when we started. That's because there was a change to these two stored procedures that were pending, or this one stored procedure. And then here's my insert to that static data that's occurring as well. So as DBA, I still get this script that I can look at, and I can say it's good or no good. Look at it, make sure there's no issues. If there were any warnings that were surfaced from SQL compare or SQL release that looked at potential data loss issues or something else, they would appear here. There's actually nothing in this file because I've done this before, but I could do that. And then I have this changes report, essentially, that we created, which is really nice to look at because it's something you could pass on to more developers or to look at in a meeting, because it's actually much easier to see what's happening. And it's an HTML report, and it's kind of broken into sections. We've got added, removed, modified, etc. And so here I can see the modified. I can see in the red the old version, the green the new one. Same thing for this procedure. And then here is my static data as well. And then identically, I can look down at the other objects. Here's all the other objects that are in a database that aren't a part of this deployment, but I can still see them. So if I want to look at it. If I were to look into the log here, and this is about done, we'll see when we're it's deploying. When we're going through here and we're getting the packages, I can go through step by step what Octopus deploy is actually doing. In this case, if I looked at what's happening, you can see the Redgate SQL release is connecting to the database. It's calling out to SQL compare. It's actually going to do some script work to see what's happening and put this together. This would include any migration scripts that I included. You could certainly have pre-post scripts coded in here as well. A variety of things you could do. So hopefully this will finish any second now. It's not terribly fun to watch this happen or to watch this in real time. Really, you only look at this when you're getting it set up, and once this works, you assume it's going to continue to work. And something changes in your environment, it breaks, and you come back here and revisit this. But for the most part, you should be able to do that click, promote, pick an environment, and have it go. In this case, looks like it's going. Let's see if it's actually deployed. I think it's doing some cleanup in Octopus here, but if you'll notice this August RC2 that was in development, it's noted as a change in integration I did not acknowledge. We now see it in acceptance as a change that's not acknowledged yet, but it's there. And if we go in there and review that, we'll see actually all the changes that are there. This was successful. Boy, that was slow at 12 minutes. Woo! I'm going to deploy it to production, and we'll see if it completes in the next few minutes. But really, your deployment should be this simple. You shouldn't have to spend a lot of time trying to build scripts to make this happen. The way that I build that script to deploy out of an integration environment to test, that should be easily repeatable to all other environments. I should be able to, whatever process I have that creates that, it gets into an RM piece of software, whether it's Microsoft's or this one or something else, and then my deployments are really smooth from that point forward. If I pass in a script, it just happens. So this is running. We've seen this happening here. Let's acknowledge these. Arnie, do you want to run that poll? I think we were going to ask if anybody is actually using release management software out there.
Sure. Go ahead and do that.
All right. We'll let that run. There's a bunch of pieces of software out there. I mean, Microsoft has Microsoft Release Management, which I've heard they're substantially redesigning and reworking. So I don't know what's going to change or when it's going to appear, but they're working on that. Octopus Deploy is a small company that Redgate works with. They've been really popular in the Agile world. It's a really neat piece of software there. CA has a release management product. BMC does. There's Urban Code Release. There's an RM component to Bamboo. There's Serena. There's a bunch of them out there that will help you ensure that the way that you deploy software to websites or to databases or to whatever else is consistent, and it happens every time. And you can certainly deploy to multiple machines and that kind of thing as well, so you don't have the human element where you forget to go through a step or you forget to deploy it somewhere. And these can even do configuration changes to IIS or Windows or whatever else. Most of them work well with PowerShell. So notice I acknowledge those. My production is actually updated here. We can see that that's the release that was made. This completed. That was actually fairly quick. And if I go back over here to my production environment and management studio, which typically, right, I shouldn't be connected to production and development, but let's just come over here. Let's rerun this query. We've actually got that piece of static data there. It was deployed through this entire process. And if I go through here, and let's pop this open again, here's my production instance, my production database, and here's the store procedure that has the change that is different from the original view. Right, here's that tab that was the original view. Here's the new tab that those changes have been deployed through. So I've seen the entire process here, right, from production to development. My last deployment is here. It's recognized as a certain version of schema. I made a change in development and management studio. My CI process in Team City kicked off, ran some automated tests, and then deployed to integration because my test passed. From there, I skipped testing, but I could deploy to testing the same way I deployed to acceptance with my Octopus release, my Octopus deploy. When I did that deployment to staging, which was slow, it stopped and asked me to acknowledge that. I got to review the scripts, see what changes were being made, and I deployed that through to production. So now I've got, other than my test environment, everything the same here and everything the same here. My test environment, again, is at RC1 from a couple months ago, but I've got my current environment here. And that's really the whole process. That's the ideal process that you want to happen in your development environment, where everything flows through from development to production very quickly. And then, of course, I've got monitoring in place to let me know if something didn't work right. If there's an issue, we can tackle it in development and very quickly put a hot fix or bug fix through. If you want more information, more help, you can contact us at dlm@redgate.com. We've got a number of online resources. We've got training that's going on in various places. If you go to the DLM training, you can find out where we're going to be, and you know it's paid training, but you're welcome to come get in-depth look at a full day of source control or a full day of CI or a full day of the automated release side of things and learn how you can implement that in your environment. If you got questions for me, please feel free to contact me. My information's up there. We are going to release a recording of this, probably take us a couple of days to get it ready, as well as answers to question. Before we go, are there any other questions, Arnie?
So yeah, there's one more question here. Let me find that question real quick. So I guess one final question is, how would you configure this DLM solution to allow for zero downtime deployments?
Zero downtime. All right. So first of all, zero downtime is impossible over time. Let's just be clear. Even if you're clustered or always on or something, there's always a downtime somewhere. Some client or something could see downtime. But how would you do this for zero downtime? So zero downtime, what this does is automate what you do already. There's no difference here at all. So if you can do zero downtime now, which means you have built your scripts in a way that isn't going to cause zero downtime, if you're making table schema alterations, you do so in a way that allows you to do kind of a switch of tables potentially, right, where I made a copy of the table, I do an update here, and then I do a metadata switch that's very quick. It's probably on the order of milliseconds or microseconds, but there's still potentially some locking, some downtime in there. However you would do that, you could make that happen here, right? So the way that I would make that happen is I would make a zero downtime deployment from integration to test, which means that I would have to potentially in development think about building in some additional scripting, some migration scripting that will handle table changes or other downtime causing issues in a very quick manner. Partition switches, whatever I'm doing, and I would have that scripting. From that point in time, once those scripts are compiled together, they get executed by the release management software in the exact same way every time. So we don't have the human element where I potentially forget something or I take too long to press a button when I go to production. That just doesn't occur because I've tested it in deployment to test, I've tested it when I deploy to staging, and now I test it again when I deploy to production. How do I test this? Really the best way to test this is you have a small client-side Windows Form app or thick client app that's constantly hitting your database to do something, and if it ever has a hiccup, it just throws a flag. And so you start that as a part of your deployment process. You start your deployment, and if it doesn't hiccup, then you know you had a zero downtime deployment. Hopefully that answers your questions. If it doesn't, please ask again or send a note or something else. Anything else, Arnie?
Nope, that was it.
All right. Hey, thank you very much for attending. Hope you enjoyed it. Give this stuff a try. You can download, Subversion is free. You can download that. You can download TeamCity or Jenkins for free. Get started with that. You can do evaluations of the Redgate products that kind of glue all this stuff together. Give it a try. Let us know what works and doesn't work. We'd be happy to help you. Thanks for spending an hour with me this morning.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye.